Where's Kathy? She's not coming to eat?
Well, she's in the kitchen, eating vegetables.
Well, why can't she eat her vegetables out here?
She said it would upset her to see us eating meat.
She wants to be a vegetarian.
It's a scene that's being played out in more and more homes across the nation. Someone in the family, the father, mother, son, daughter, grandparent, or other relatives, someone in the family is becoming a vegetarian. In their quest for physical and psychological well-being, hundreds of thousands of people are changing their diet. And in doing so, they're changing the way of life of an entire country. Vegetarianism is something that practically every institution in America has had to deal with. We talked with Raoul DePaul of the United Airlines food service that supplies in-flight meals.
Well, the demand for special meals has been going up more and more. And we are producing right now something to about between 400 and 500 a day for different reasons. Vegetarians, low cholesterol, diabetic, different types of vegetarian meals. For religion purpose, kosher, Hindu, and so forth. We have quite a bit of reaction from the passengers and their comments, which we are asking for. The way I see it right now is our way of cooking has to be changed, and the dishes has to be corrected. Less meat and more vegetables to be served. The people are asking for it, so we have to reply to it.
Food Service Director Michael Berry of UCLA just how big vegetarianism has become on campus.
Since the time I've been on campus, the increase of demand for vegetarian or health food type items has been quite pronounced. It's even more noticeable in my own mind coming from a non-university environment into a university environment. With the age group that we're dealing with, these people are particularly interested in their health. We're a very athletic campus, and health foods, including vegetarian items, seem to be of great interest. Here in the cooperage, we keep increasing the number of items constantly due to the demand, and each time we increase it, we end up selling out, so we increase it a little bit more. So the demand is definitely on the rise, as well as the acceptance by the campus community. As a businessman, part of the decisions that you make are marketing decisions and the viability of a product, and health food items have become more and more marketable. Even using as much space as we are in this unit, especially the center space of the unit for vegetarian items, shows that they are marketable. There is an awareness on their part. It's nurtured by their peer group, and it's nurtured hopefully by us making them even more aware of what we have to offer. And we have to meet a need on the campus to provide these sort of items.
You can be sure that any cultural phenomenon that's on the upswing will surely find its way to Hollywood. And vegetarianism is no exception.
We're about to close, but everything's fine now.
Thank you very much. I can't tell you how nice it is to eat in a restaurant alone.
Thanks for keeping the place open for us.
Okay, I'm sure you get bothered a lot, you know.
Sometimes. I'll have the vegetable plate.
May I recommend the lamb chops? They're especially good.
Well, I'm a vegetarian, so that wouldn't be for me. So.
Well, excuse me.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Good. You know, beans are very much misunderstood. They have a complex set of amino acids. If you eat beans together with rice, you never have to eat meat.
Danny loves to talk about beans. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Talk. It's a combination that counts. Hey, you want some of these?
Yeah, I do.
No, I've been thinking about that.
Oh, hi. Jerry Warren, Softwares.
Hi, Bill Neal, Hardware.
Hardware?
He doesn't get it, Bill.
I own a couple of health clubs, barbells, hardware. It's my wife, Karen.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You too.
Primate?
No, I try to stay away from meat.
Maybe later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Boy, I'm dying. Did you see that meat? Get me out of here, Bill.
The bookstores are full of vegetarian cookbooks and diet books. And every American city now has its natural food stores and restaurants, such as these in Southern California. This vegetarian restaurant on Sunset Strip in Los Angeles has been owned for more than 10 years by Winton Winslow.
Oh, yeah. It used to be years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, that the only vegetarians per se were young kids. You know, they come out of the peace movement of the 60s into the vegetarian thing of the 70s.
No.
But now it isn't that way. You see businessmen in here at lunchtime today, and they are vegetarians. Now, 7 or 8 years ago, you would not have seen that. You have seen a bunch of people walking around in gowns, and they were on a religious trip of some kind, and they were vegetarians. And I think the population realized, through the media also, that what these kids were saying had a lot of merit to it. I mean, it was a lot healthier having grains and cereals and brown rice than it was having a hamburger.
People of all ages and in all walks of life seem to be taking up the trend.
So tonight we're making 5 preparations, and we'll be having paratas, which is a stuffed triangle bread.
These women, all attorneys, are taking a vegetarian cooking class in posh Beverly Hills. The big question is why?
I mean, there's only one way to steam vegetables, so this is a lot more exciting kind of way of cooking.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to take a vegetarian cooking class was I got interested in vegetarian cooking from my daughters. One does a lot of vegetarian cooking. The other became a vegetarian, and, well, we were very worried in the beginning. We kept being afraid she wouldn't get enough protein, she wouldn't get enough this. And the irony is that before, she was a student at UC Davis, and before she became a vegetarian, she had colitis. Once she became a vegetarian, the colitis went away. And that sure seemed to prove to us that it certainly can't be unhealthy for you to be a vegetarian. And then the food was so good that she and her sisters cooked that we just decided we had to start learning and cooking some of this stuff for ourselves so we can pass on the recipes to them.
It seems that everyone has a different reason for becoming a vegetarian.
The food. I love the food. It's not only is it healthy, but it just tastes good to me.
When I was growing up, there was a gentleman named Victor H. Linlard on the radio every morning as I go to school. You are what you eat. And that message took a long time, but it finally got through.
I used to be about 200 pounds, and I decided that there had to be another way.
Well, I don't like the idea of slaughtering animals.
So, just an overall concern for my health and longevity.
Can this be a vegetarian?
The reason I started experimenting with a vegetarian diet was that I wanted to find a healthier alternative than the typical bodybuilding diet, which consisted mostly of, at the time, of red meat, fish, chicken, and too much protein in general. I do have a lot better endurance, and I generally feel better, yes. I really do.
Keep it going.
Peter Burwash, a leading tennis pro and president of PBI International with 24 tennis clinics around the world, has been a vegetarian for 12 years.
Just like when people stop smoking, they taste their food better. Well, when you stop eating meat, you have to taste your food better because you're no longer putting all those chemicals that they have to put into the flesh to even be able to put it in your mouth. People don't realize it takes 6 weeks by the time it gets to your mouth a lot of times, and you are eating gray, green, moldy, rotted flesh, but they've covered it up and made it look packaged. And when you think about it, the meat is the only thing practically in the supermarket that isn't labeled, so you don't even know what's in there, and people have been fooled. So yeah, you have to go through some difficulties sometimes, but it's worth every bit of it. The first year I was on the tennis circuit, there were all kinds of jokes. The first year I was a vegetarian. I was on the circuit from 1967, but I was the butt of a lot of jokes. So if you didn't have so many carrots hanging out of your ears, you'd run faster and everything. But then I started beating the players, and I started becoming fitter. In fact, I had the highest fitness index of any athlete in Canada. And my left-hand strength increased 38%. My oxygen uptake and my blood flow, everything I did was so much better. So I then gained the respect because I became faster. I was actually running faster. I was reacting faster. My whole awareness on the court was so much greater. So what turned into the beginning of a lot of jokes, suddenly they weren't joking so much when I was beating them.
What a feeling, what a sight, when we see that number 12 in green and white. 1, 2, 3, hip, go, go, go. No one else can soar like Broadway Joe.
I ate meat, red meat, up until 77, and as a football player on the Rams named Freddie Dreyer. And Freddie is just a picture of physical good health. And he's been a vegetarian for 10 years, 11 years now, and he's been a professional football player that long now, too. So he's proven that you don't need some things that we think we need to eat. And he got me off of the red meat and off of some other junk. I don't drink sweet.
Dr. Susan Smith-Jones has a Ph.D. in health sciences and has been an instructor in physical fitness at the University of California for 9 years.
It's a myth that you don't get enough protein in a vegetarian diet. Some of the best research done recently over in Europe and parts of the United States that's not funded by any large food processing company shows that Americans get far much more protein than their bodies need. The extra protein that you take in the body is very toxic, so that although a vegetarian diet offers less protein than a meat or non-vegetarian diet, you don't need that much protein. And if you eat a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes and sprouts and all that good stuff, there is no problem with getting enough protein. You'll get plenty on a healthy, well-balanced vegetarian diet, so there's really nothing to worry about.
We talked to Nathan Pritikin, author of the best-selling book, The Pritikin Program for Diet and Exercise, and asked him if there is any truth to the statement that meat can cause cancer.
Well, that means the amount of fat we eat on the American diet is 5 times more than the body can handle. And the consequences of too much fat are not only diabetes and hypertension and accelerating you towards heart disease, but the National Cancer Institute, which is the federal agency to investigate cancer, now tells us that the amount of fat we eat in the American diet is a principal cause of breast cancer and colon cancer. So we find it's not only heart disease that's the problem, it's all the major diseases.
There are a number of reasons why vegetarians have an advantage over non-vegetarians as far as coronary heart disease is concerned. Animal fat has long been known to raise cholesterol levels, and animal foods tend to carry cholesterol in themselves. So together, you have a double disadvantage. More recently, it has been shown that animal protein, gram for gram as compared to plant protein, will raise cholesterol, whereas plant proteins will lower it. So here is another good reason for considering a switch from animal foods to plant foods.
But not all doctors and nutritionists agree.
There is no real proof at this time that meat is a contributing factor to any pathological condition. And in light of the fact that there's no conclusive clinical evidence at this time to oppose that, I think that meat continues to be one of the most vital components of anyone's diet and is an important factor that needs to be considered.
But what about the laws of nature? Are human beings, like some animals, designed to eat meat? Or do our bodies more closely resemble the vegetarian species? Dr. John Friswold gives us some interesting insights.
The major three things we should probably think about are teeth, stomachs, and gut length. The human being has a gut that's 12 times his body length. That's from the crown rump length, from the top of his head to his buttocks. And a carnivore, like a leopard or a lion, would have one that's about 3 times. The teeth in the carnivores, for example, are sharp. And they stick down, they stick up, so they can grab, hold, and tear. And they swallow their food almost whole. You ever watch a dog, he bolts his food. For example, if you have a gut that's only 3 times your body length, the food would go through rather rapidly. And these animals eat meat which rots very fast. If we put meat in our body, for example, and we've got a 12 times gut length, then it would putrefy and rot and so forth before it gets out, because we've got such a long distance for it to go.
Dr. John Scharfenberg, a leading specialist in the field of applied nutrition.
Let's look at bowel cancer, colon cancer. Here's a graph showing bowel cancer as it relates to meat consumption in a study of 23 nations. The more meat used, the higher the risk of bowel cancer. Let me give you another example of a problem we have with steak. Let's take, for example, charcoal broiled steak. If we have a kilogram of this charcoal broiled steak, we produce as much benzopyrene, a carcinogenic agent, as you have in the smoke of 600 cigarettes. Let's take another cancer, lymph gland cancer. Dr. Alan Cunningham went around the world, checked 16 countries, and he noticed that as the meat intake went up, particularly with beef, the risk of lymph gland cancer increased. Dr. Harayama, a noted Japanese epidemiologist, has been doing a study of over 300,000 Japanese. He studied 142,000 Japanese women. He has shown in one of his studies that those who ate meat daily had 3.8 times greater risk of breast cancer than those who ate meat less than once a week. So from the anatomy standpoint alone, it looks like our Creator made us to be a kind of an animal that does not eat other animals.
One brand of heifers, all one brand of heifers out of Eagle, Colorado, 200, out of Pin 230 and 229.
Nevertheless, man has become a very big killer of animals. According to the latest available figures, more than 40 million cows are killed each year in America. This takes place in modern, automated slaughterhouses, and for many vegetarians, their principal concern is not their own health and well-being, but what they see as unnecessary violence to other living creatures. We showed a film of what actually goes on inside a slaughterhouse to these people. Then we asked them, does seeing this film change the way you think about eating meat? Could you go out right now and buy a hamburger? Of the 475 surveyed, 60% considered giving up meat entirely.
Yeah, I almost threw up in there. And I kept thinking, coming out of the place, my stomach was turning. And I eat some meat now, not an awful lot, but I eat. And I thought, all I have to do is think back on this particular, film, the side of it.
Well, I have friends who are vegetarians, and they've always tried to explain to me why I shouldn't eat meat, but after seeing that movie, there's just no doubt. I mean, there's just so much cruelty. I don't see how anybody can eat after that, eat meat after that. It's horrible.
Well, I'd probably have a hard time going out and eating a steak right now.
I always took eating meat for granted, and I always felt that you needed it to be healthy. But after seeing that, I've got to think very seriously about this.
Well, I just can't get over how cruel they are when they kill those animals. I mean, it's just hard to believe that, animals have that kind of reaction to dying. I never dreamed it was that way.
People in general don't seem to like thinking about where their meat comes from.
Oh, if the meat is there, I'll eat it, but I won't kill the animal. That's disgusting. Now I'm looking at it, it looks terrible.
Gretchen Weiler, star of stage and screen, tells us why she is a vegetarian.
When I made the decision, and I think that it's a decision that many people should think seriously about, is now that we realize that we're all sharing this planet, I think the arrogance of mankind is now really coming into question. Whether or not we really are the higher species. How many of us can weave a web in 2 hours? How many children can be born and run around like the horse? And in other words, there are so many things that other species do that are so remarkable that makes them not lesser creatures, but just other creatures that are different nations. I think the nutritional backlash is terrific. And the side effects that I think I'm probably much healthier, but that was not the reason for becoming a vegetarian. I felt that if I was in the animal rights movement, I could not eat the object of my compassion. And I'm always surprised when people would say, oh, I love animals. And I do ask them very gently if they would please make it very clear that they love dogs and cats, or they love some other kinds of animals. But if you say you are an animal lover, you cannot eat the object of your compassion, nor can you wear it either.
Nonviolence, based on the ancient spiritual traditions of the East, is a factor in the vegetarianism of many. We spoke with Professor Thomas J. Smith.
Many of the Eastern religions have nonviolence as their principal tenet. For instance, there is Buddhism, which began in India in the 6th century before Christ as a reaction to meat eating. And even in the West, there is also a history of vegetarianism. In Genesis, God first recommended a vegetarian diet. And down through religious history, Christian sects such as the Trappists and the Seventh-day Adventists have also adopted vegetarianism. Plato and Pythagoras were also vegetarians.
Throughout history, there have been many famous vegetarians. Leonardo da Vinci, French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Henry David Thoreau, and Mahatma Gandhi, to name a few. Benjamin Franklin became a vegetarian at age 16. In his autobiographical writings, he called flesh-eating unprovoked murder. George Bernard Shaw, once when asked to explain his youthful appearance, he retorted, "I look my age. It is the other people who look older than they are. What can you expect from people who eat corpses?" Nobel Prize-winning author Isaac Bashevis Singer became a vegetarian for ethical reasons at the age of 58. He said, "Naturally, I am sorry now that I waited so long, but it is better late than never." Interestingly enough, the established churches have done little to encourage the growing trend of vegetarianism.
The Jewish law is not how not to kill the cow, but how not to disrespect the cow when you're killing.
We have to maintain biologically our bodies. That's important. The stewardship of our bodies is important. And if it requires killing, not murder, but killing, then it is all right to kill.
But there are some Christians, such as the Seventh-day Adventists, who believe that the Bible is clearly opposed to the idea of eating meat.
The diet of vegetarianism was provided for man in the beginning. In the very first chapter that we have in the Bible, God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat." And I have lived out my life thus far as a vegetarian, and certainly I do not think that I appear too emaciated here.
And many young Americans joining new religious movements have also readily adopted the age-old tradition of vegetarianism.
According to the ancient wisdom of India's Vedic culture, people shouldn't cause unnecessary pain to any living creature, including the animals. These are the principles of ahimsa, or nonviolence, and the law of karma, that every action has a reaction. So practicing these principles of compassion creates an atmosphere not for war, but for peace.
It may be a more peaceful world, but will it be well fed? We asked Francis Moore LePay, author of the best-selling book Diet for a Small Planet, and director of the Institute for Food and Development Policy.
Well, the first point that I think is the most dramatic is to look at a piece of steak as a Cadillac. And what I mean by that is that we in America got hooked on gas-guzzling automobiles because of the illusion of cheap energy, the illusion of cheap petroleum. Likewise, we got hooked on a grain-fed, meat-centered diet in the United States because of the illusion of cheap grain. So what does that mean? I mean, you look at that piece of steak, and when I look at it, what I see are economic ground rules, in a sense, behind that piece of steak that have driven U.S. agriculture to produce more and more and more grain, so that it made sense eventually to feed half of the harvested acreage in the United States to livestock. I then learned that on average we only get 1 pound back in meat on our plate for every 7 pounds of nutrients in the grain that is fed to livestock. We only get 1 pound back. So I put this together, this very small return, together with the enormous amount of resources that we funnel into livestock. And I had that first moment when I realized that our problems were not agricultural, they weren't the limits of the earth to feed us, but they were economic and political.
Agronomist Bill Epps agrees.
In terms of food value, a cow is worth much more alive than dead. In just 1 year, you can get more usable nutrition in the form of milk, butter, and cheese than you can get in the several years it takes to mature an animal for slaughter. Just look at the United States. We have a current surplus of more than 440 million pounds of butter, 545 million pounds of cheese, and 764 million pounds of dried milk sitting in government storehouses. Using agricultural and energy resources to produce meat is wasteful for any country.
This is great. Oh, there is one other reason why people become vegetarians. It's cheaper.
Major funding for this show has been provided by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Anyone who is interested in learning more about vegetarianism is invited to send for their free book, The Higher Taste. It examines all aspects of the meatless diet and also contains more than 60 easy-to-prepare recipes. To receive a free postpaid copy, write to The Higher Taste, 3764 Watseka Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 934.
The popular image of India, backward and poverty-ridden. 650 million people jostling each other for food and a livelihood. A few so-called modern cities, and the rest a vast rural slum. India, the rooted impassivity of an ancient civilization clinging to an outmoded pastoral culture. This is the popular image, but like so many popular images, it's not really accurate. The people may be poor, but they are self-sufficient. They are reasonably well-fed and simply but adequately housed. They don't have much of the technology that passes for civilization in the West, but then they don't have many of our problems either. What they do seem to have is a peaceful and satisfying outlook on life that is all too often missing from our own culture. But Westerners tend to see this contentment as laziness. They mistake the simplicity of the people for ignorance. Westerners, beginning with the British, have been trying to change India for centuries. Yet today, little has changed. Most of the population still lives in the vast countryside, and they live much the same as they have in the past, a past that stretches back thousands of years. Are they stubbornly clinging to their ancient superstitions and beliefs, or do they simply prefer their way of life to our own? A case in point is the sacred cow. Though it sometimes seems the whole country is overrun with animals, Hindu India will neither kill nor eat her cattle, the native humpback zebus. It is particularly hard for Westerners to understand this worship of cows. After all, we live in the land of the Golden Arch, where the hamburger reigns as the single most popular American dish. Western economists say that beef alone could solve India's food problems and perhaps lay the base for a lucrative export trade. It's in this context that cattle worship and cattle protection have been attacked for over a century as lunatic obstacles to farm management. The sacred cow, we use that very phrase to describe perversity, any blind, irrational loyalty that slows progress or impedes logical problem solving. But it often pays to re-examine our own perspectives and try to view other people's beliefs without prejudice. Let's take a closer, more objective look at the sacred cow and try to understand why it is so important to India. To begin to understand the zebu cattle controversy, it's necessary to go into the countryside, for India is fundamentally rural. As the population is multiplied, land holdings have been split and split again, so that most contemporary farmers have a mere acre or two, hardly enough to warrant the purchase of a tractor. And even if the farming plots were increased to the point where tractors became cost-effective, they would be useless because of India's unique weather. As soon as the monsoon rains have softened the cracked earth, it must be plowed and planted. Even a day's delay in planting can greatly reduce the yield because of the searing heat that soon ends the growing season. Under such conditions, bullocks are ideal, for they can plow wet soil without overly compacting the earth, as tractors do. As in family farms everywhere, the whole household must work. And in India, most work is still done in the traditional labor-intensive way. The staples are wheat and rice, for all good Hindus and many Muslim and Christian Indians as well are vegetarian. Their main source of animal protein is milk and its byproducts. The churn is a part of every household. The fact is that cows produce much more usable protein in the form of milk, butter, and cheese than in the form of beef. It takes 7 times more acreage to produce a pound of beef than it does to produce a pound of milk. For India, with its already strained resources, the allocation of so much more acreage for the production of beef would be disastrous. Modern reformers have contended that the introduction of new intensive farming techniques would increase the total yield per acre, so that eventually beef could be introduced into India's diet. They say this would improve the people's health, which would also increase the overall productivity of the nation. They also argue that because of religious taboos, most Indians would not agree to these changes. And at least on this point, the reformers are right. Cow slaughter and meat eating are strictly prohibited by India's ancient scriptures. These scriptures, called the Vedas, date back some 5,000 years and are acknowledged to be the oldest written religious teachings in existence. They are also the most elaborate. According to the Vedas, the human diet should consist of grains, fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. Meat eating is specifically condemned. It is described as both cruel and unhealthy, and is regarded as extremely detrimental to spiritual advancement. The penalty, or karmic reaction, for slaughtering animals for food is severe. Meat eaters must take birth again and again to suffer in turn at the hands of every animal that they have ever eaten. Most Indians firmly believe in these laws of karma, and with the promise of such harsh consequences, they are understandably reluctant to flaunt these laws by eating any kind of meat. The Vedas say that all animals are supposed to be protected, but above all, the cow is considered to be sacred. This is Lord Krishna. According to the Vedas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When he incarnated on Earth 5,000 years ago, he appeared as a simple cowherd boy, and his childhood pastimes were spent in caring for his beloved cows. One of his names, in fact, is Gopal, friend and protector of the cows. Because of this close identification with Krishna, the cow is honored and revered as sacred. In addition, the cow is frequently seen in the Vedas as a symbol for religiosity and for the other virtuous qualities it exhibits, qualities like charity and mercy, because of the cow's generosity with its milk, or motherhood, because of the tender, loving care cows give their young, and because of the importance of cow's milk in nurturing our own young. Small wonder that all but 2 Indian states have anti-cow slaughter laws, and that all of India would protest and riot if beef consumption were in any way encouraged. But putting religious and moral considerations aside for the moment, there is still a controversy, even in the West, as to whether meat eating is actually healthy. India certainly has its health problems, mainly due to urban overcrowding and inadequate sanitation and medical facilities. But it is interesting to note that high blood pressure, heart disease, arthritis, and cancer, the greatest medical problems of the West, are almost non-existent in India. Recent studies have confirmed that vegetarians everywhere suffer a far lower incidence of these diseases than do meat eaters. However backward we may consider rural agrarian India, perhaps we should not be so eager to inject our own unsolved problems into that simple but basically self-sufficient lifestyle. But critics have said that it's also a marginal way of life, one that produces few surpluses. From their universities and government administrative posts, critics pointed out that if the farmer's cow turns barren, he's lost his only chance of replacing the work team. And if the cow goes dry, the household has lost its milk and butter. Fortunately, in reality, the situation is somewhat less precarious. Neighbors of the same village share their food freely, and if one family loses its cows or bullocks, friends and relatives will lend their animals to help out. In a culture so compassionate that it prohibits cow slaughter, helping one's neighbor is an even more sacred obligation. But strangely enough, it is this cultural compassion that is the source of most of the controversy. India's persistent refusal to kill her aged and useless cows has drawn the heaviest critical attack from reformers. Farmers will not kill sick bullocks and aging cows for food, or even sell them for money to buy replacements. Instead, they're kept alive, and there are even nursing homes to look after some of them. The homes are called goshalas. Some are government agencies, and some are private charities set up by rich Hindus seeking spiritual grace. In hard times, farmers can board their ailing cattle here free of charge, reclaiming them when times get better. Critics say, why not just let them die off? They say that India can't afford to keep these useless cows that compete for croplands and precious foodstuffs. A persuasive argument. But India actually spends less on its sick and aging cattle than Americans spend on nursing their cats and dogs. And India's cattle population is 6 times as large as the American pet population. To the Indian farmer, his cattle are members of the family, to be cared for at least as well as pets. And since the farmers also depend on their cattle for their livelihood, it makes both good economic and emotional sense to see that they are well taken care of. In the slack time between harvest and the next planting, the cattle are washed and groomed the way proud owners clean and polish the family car on weekends. The Indian farmer takes pleasure in adorning them, especially for the twice-yearly cow festivals, one of which is held in the late summer at the end of the rains, and the other one right at the end of the harvest period. Much the same scene is taking place all through rural India. Festooned and garlanded, the cattle have been herded to the local common. Most of the villagers who assemble arrive with treats, such as succulent mustard greens. While the cattle forage stolidly as cattle do, The celebrants sprinkle them with water and make their thanksgivings. Our Western culture looks with revulsion at people who cook and eat their cats and dogs. We shouldn't be surprised that most of India feels the same way about anyone who would cook and eat a cow. But critics say that India cannot afford this luxury. They've been saying that if India will not eat the cow will eat India. And on the surface, it would seem to be true. India has over 200 million zebus, 1/5 of the world's cattle. With so many animals in competition, they say not even the healthy ones get enough to eat, at least by Western standards. Exasperated critics have been saying it for a century. If only India didn't worship the cow. If only we could get rid of all the useless animals. Many still say it. But about 15 years ago, investigators began to re-examine the whole system of cow protection. What they found was that for India, the protection of cows and bullocks is not only useful and practical, but actually essential to the nation's economy. For in fact, cattle are India's greatest natural resource. They consume only grass, which grows everywhere, and yet they produce not only essential nutrition, but fertilizer, fuel, and more power than all of India's generating plants. India runs on bullock power. 15 million bullock carts moving some 15 billion ton-kilometers of goods. New studies in energetics have shown that bullocks do 2/3 of the work on the average farm. Electricity and fossil fuels do a mere 10%. Bullocks not only plow the fields and haul the produce, but also grind the sugar cane to extract the syrup, which is then boiled down and shaped by hand into sugar cakes. Bullocks turn the presses that render the linseed oil. Converting India's bullock power to machinery would cost an estimated $20 to $30 billion, plus far more in fuel, maintenance, and replacement costs. And even a zebu cow gives an efficient quantity of milk, considering its low upkeep cost. Frothy from being boiled, cool to drinking temperature by the time-honored technique, it's the favorite Indian refreshment. Farmers' cheese and sweetmeats made from milk solids are other popular delicacies. The biggest energy contribution of cows and bullocks is actually their dung. India's cattle produce 800 million tons of manure every year. In the countryside, it is the children's job to see that none is missed or overlooked. Hardly the kind of thing Westerners would want their children to touch, let alone bring home. But in India, the people learn from the ancient Vedic scriptures that cow dung is different from all other forms of excrement. Far from being untouchable, cow manure is considered pure. Obviously, Westerners said, this is the kind of absurd conclusion you arrive at when you start worshiping animals. And once again, Westerners were wrong. After exhaustive scientific tests, it turns out that cow dung is not only completely free from harmful bacteria, but also does a terrific job of killing them. It is a natural antiseptic, every bit as good as Lysol or Mr. Clean. But most of the cow manure is plowed in as fertilizer at no cost to the farmer or to the world's fossil fuel reserves. The remainder is used for fuel. It's odorless and burns without scorching, giving a slow, even heat. So a housewife can count on leaving her pots unattended all day or return at any time to a grill that's been preheated for short order cooking. To replace dung with coal would cost India an additional $1.5 billion a year. Set out in terms of the energy equation, India's cattle culture begins to look far more economical and attractive. Those who so strongly advised changes in the past are now less certain. Time after time, they've seen their hopeful solutions undone by the hard lessons of practical reality. A good example is the water buffalo, once seen as the perfect answer to India's cow problems. India's farmers were encouraged to begin using them and breeding them in the hope that they would one day replace the sacred cow. Water buffaloes are not held sacred, and they are an abundant source of milk. But water buffalo must wallow once a day and are unable to survive where water is scarce. This is no small drawback in India. The water buffaloes did prove to be heavier and stronger than the zebus, but to the farmers, this just meant providing more feed. Like the American muscle cars of the 50s and 60s, the water buffaloes were no match for the lightweight economy models, the trim, fuel-efficient zebus. So back to the drawing board. And now the debate has shifted. Unable to come up with a workable alternative to the cow, the reformers have devised a new argument. Why not keep the old cattle culture, they say, but modernize it, streamline it, and make it much more efficient? So there began several ambitious programs for improving the breed, using pedigree bulls bought from Europe, as well as artificial insemination. But there were problems, and with the benefit of hindsight, it is easy to see why. The new hybrids couldn't work until they died of old age. They had no hump of survival to last out droughts and famines, and they didn't come dirt cheap. The new hybrids did give 3 or 4 times as much milk as the zebus, but this too turned out to be a problem because there was no efficient way to distribute the milk to India's widespread population. India's old-fashioned system of distribution is highly decentralized, primitive by Western standards. Again, the solution seemed simple. With pasteurization, bottling plants, and other sophisticated Western methods of distribution, everyone in India could have fresh, uncontaminated milk, as we do in the West. In their zealous pursuit of efficiency, the reformers even set up experimental automats to dispense skim milk powder, milk, and cream. And behind all these efforts at modernization was an unstated belief. People would soon begin to appreciate the abundant rewards bestowed by these new Western deities, technology and efficiency, and cow worship would eventually disappear. But once again, problems kept cropping up. And in the end, it was modernization that failed to prove its value. For the Indian farmer, the old ways remained the best. Take pasteurization, for example. In India, everyone likes to drink their milk piping hot. So Indian housewives have always boiled their milk anyway as a matter of taste. For India, pasteurization would be a waste of time and money. And speaking of money, it seems that the proponents of modernization had conveniently forgotten that modern Western cattle technology is powered by machinery, not men, and consumes vast amounts of energy. Tractors, giant harvesting machines, milking machines, and daily pickups by refrigerated tankers using modern highways. And this is only the beginning. In the Western distribution system, there are huge bottling plants, refrigeration in every store, and refrigerators in every home. With India's searing climate, refrigeration costs alone would make the milk too expensive for 95% of India's population. India was beginning to realize that these Western gods could be very demanding indeed. They gobbled land, energy, and money at an alarming rate. And India, lacking the vast natural resources of the West, simply could not afford to replace the zebu. The wonderful thing about zebus is that they get along very well on practically nothing. Things humans can't use, like wheat stubble, rice straw, and husks. Far from being useless and impractical, the zebu is an efficient, natural recycling machine. Indeed, it is something of a miracle. And so it eventually became clear that this ancient system of cow protection remains the most practical and efficient agricultural model for India today. But it was not just economics that decided the fate of India's cows. Western-style cattle breeding depends on scientific culling, killing off the less productive animals. The ancient Vedic scriptures that form the basis of their religious and moral beliefs say that such cruelty to animals leads to a disregard for human life. Historical evidence would seem to confirm this. Vegetarian cultures generally exhibit less aggressive behavior and go to war less often than societies that eat meat. Standing on the brink of World War III, perhaps our own society should give this possibility some serious consideration. In fact, there are many ideas in the ancient Vedas that should merit our serious attention. Of course, like most people, we naturally tend to think of our own country and way of life as being the best. We point to our great standard of living and to the fantastic achievements of our science and technology, and conclude that this is how everyone should live. But we neglect to mention the nightmares that come with the American dream. Pollution, drug abuse, crime, and a host of new medical problems like cancer, heart disease, and high blood pressure. We also have to contend with rising suicide rates caused by increased anxiety and depression. The problem is that in filling our bellies so well, we've neglected to provide sufficient nourishment for the soul. There is much we can learn from the rich spiritual heritage of India, but only if we are willing to question our own values, attitudes, and beliefs. After all, between the zebu and Western technology, which is really the sacred cow?
Higher Taste features Peter Burwash, world-renowned Davis Cup tennis pro, author and lecturer, and president of Peter Burwash International, with vegetarian gourmet chef Nancy Rossi. In today's special, vegetarian cuisine for the athlete.
"16 years ago, I made an adjustment in the way I ate. I became a vegetarian. Now, I'm on the road about 300 days a year, and many years ago, that was a big problem, but today it's becoming a lot easier. Many of the hotels are putting vegetarian cuisine on their menus. The airlines have made it very easy to order special vegetarian meals, and there are vegetarian restaurants springing up in almost every city around the world. But you know, as much as the food has improved on the road, nothing beats a good home-cooked meal. Now, my good friend Nancy is going to teach you and I how to prepare vegetarian food. And what are we going to look at here today, Nancy?
Well, we're going to prepare a couple of different preparations. Start the morning off with a scrambled omelet, similar to scrambled eggs, without the eggs, of course. And then you're going to be out on the courts all day, so work up a good appetite, and you'll come home and we'll have a lasagna Italian feast for dinner this evening.
Wonderful.
So we're starting off here with boiling the milk a simple way. You're making actually homemade cheese that is going to resemble an omelet when we finish here.
When you say resemble, will it also taste like an omelet?
Even better. That's
Even
what everyone says that tries this. They really like it much better. It seems to have a very wonderful taste. What we do is take the milk to a rapid boil. Now it's got to be a rumbling boil, just about now. And then you're going to add some fresh lemon to it. Lemon is usually practical because everyone has it in the refrigerator. If not, you can use citrus acid, sour salt you can get in any market usually.
Okay.
Now you just pour enough in. Maybe for this amount of milk, 2 tablespoons should do it. There you go.
And this is not difficult for a bachelor to prepare? Or
Anyone.
Anyone can do this?
Just
You're sure?
Just need a pot, milk, bring it to a boil, and once it boils, just pour this lemon juice in. And you can see immediately now, you turn the heat off, turn off the flame, and then it starts to separate. And this is like curds and whey, in essence, what you're making. If you look here, you can see.
Very much. Looks almost like eggs, just a little bit of coloring, and we've got it.
So what you do is just simply, in a colander or cheesecloth, you just strain your cheese right here, and you're going to just let it set and strain for about 10 minutes. Pour this off.
Now, this entire process of preparing this, how long would it take? A lot of people are really concerned in the morning. You know, they're rushing around. They've got up late. They got to get to work.
This will set for 10 minutes. While it's setting, we are going to heat up some ghee, and we're going to fry some potatoes that are going to go inside, right inside the omelet.
What is ghee exactly?
You'd simply boil butter down to make ghee, and all the impurities come out of it, so it's a very pure, excellent cooking medium. It's been said that if you use ghee to cook vegetables, fruits, and so forth, that you will lose that desire. It very much satisfies the desire and the taste we have for eating meat. And let's face it, we all grew up on a meat diet.
Yeah, that's pretty important, because that's, you know, whenever you ask someone why they eat meat, almost all of the reasons are because it tastes good. And when people who do study and understand the concept of a vegetarian way of life, the only argument really left at the end is that, you know, meat does taste good. So if you can satisfy this, this is a wonderful substitute.
As I said, when you cook with ghee, it doesn't soak up the oil. Rather, it cooks it at a very high temperature very quickly and leaves it a very nice flavor.
Another interesting factor is that people think they can lower their cholesterol count by way of exercise. Well, that's pretty much of a myth. You could probably take it down a few percentage points, but Nathan Pritikin's son, who is also a doctor, found that on a vegetarian diet, you can lower your cholesterol count 25% in 3.5 weeks. So what this means is that, let's say someone had a cholesterol count of around 210, 220, they could get into the safe zone on a vegetarian diet in 3.5 weeks. And this is pretty darn important, because we're losing a lot of people from our population each year because of a heart attack. They eat too much cholesterol.
So you can see how beautifully this ghee cooks. Very quickly, you can get it so hot,
Exactly, boy.
And they just look really nice. And we'll just set them right over here on the side on a paper towel quickly. Great. Okay, now the next step here, we're simply going to take this wok. Wok is very nice to cook with. You can stir fry very quickly and keep everything moving around real nice. And we'll just take a little bit of this hot ghee here. Maybe 2 tablespoons is all. So here we're going to just heat up this ghee again until it gets hot and smokes. And we're going to be using a few different spices. That is the key to really to excellent vegetarian cooking, is the spicing. And some of these spices you may not be familiar with. You can pick actually most of these up today at the health food store. The first one we're going to use here is cumin. Cumin seed. And we're just going to take about a teaspoon of cumin and brown it right in here in this ghee, real quick. It'll cook very quickly.
Now, in the beginning, is a lot of this just kind of trial and error in terms of the proportion of the spices that you use, or is there a...
No, I have some excellent recipes that I'll be sharing with you, but really, you just want to put about a teaspoon of cumin for a gallon of milk that you're making. And I've cut up some green peppers here, and we'll just throw these in. So we'll have a green pepper, tomato, and cheese omelet today.
Great.
There we go. We're just going to stir fry these up real quick until the green pepper just maybe lightly browned. You still want to keep them green and crisp. Don't want to overcook them. Now the next thing we're going to do is just put maybe about a half a stick of butter in there. 2 tablespoons approximately for that amount of milk.
Now, is there an order here? You said you're going to use the tomatoes.
The tomatoes will go in a little bit afterwards. This butter is excellent to cook this milk curd in. And you just cook it down just a little bit, and then we're going to add some powdered spices. These spices, the turmeric right here, will give the little delicate yellow flavor, and you'll see once we cook this all up how much it will look just like eggs.
And that's important psychologically, too, that people actually, because they've become so conditioned from a young age to think that they should be eating something
right.
looks like just like eggs in the morning.
That's right. Just maybe a half a teaspoon of this is all you need.
Okay.
Just throw that right in. And we're going to put a little ground coriander. All of these spices you can get in specialty shops, but now they are all available at health food stores. And they have so many values. Not only nutritively, they aid digestion, purify the blood. Sometime we'll have a full class and go over all the different spices and how they can really benefit. And this spice, hing, is very nice. It's actually a substitute for onions and garlic, and I know a lot of people have difficulty with digestion with onions and garlic. About a half a teaspoon of hing.
That's similar to asafoetida?
Asafoetida or hing. You can get that. Some health food stores do carry that.
Right.
Sometimes you will have to go to a specialty shop for that. Most Asian shops will carry that. And the spices really make a big difference here. The next step, we'll just take these fresh tomatoes that we've cut up here. Right into the wok they go. You know, when you cook in this very simple way, you can actually savor and really actually rediscover the natural, delicious taste and quality that fresh food and vegetables have. So I know even now in restaurants you think you're getting real eggs and you're not. You can see that this is really shaping up and looking more and more like scrambled eggs. When I'm making this today, we're using fresh green pepper, tomato. The varieties are endless. You can make spinach.
Ooh,
you
that
can
sounds great,
spinach
yeah.
and cheese omelet. You could put broccoli. It's just up to your imagination what you'd like to do, but I thought green pepper and tomato would be nice. We're just going to sprinkle a very little bit of salt. One of the wonderful things about cooking with spicing and learning how to cook with spicing is you really don't need very much salt at all. And because the spices and the cooking very quickly and the ghee actually enhance the flavor of food. And as you know, most Americans, they just salt and pepper their food to the point of, you know, very little, just a little bit of salt and pepper here. And if you could just kind of stir that a little bit, we're just going to garnish this with a little cheese.
You're going to get me involved here, are you?
There you go.
All
right there.
One of the things, too, that when I first switched over to becoming a vegetarian, Nancy, was I took an awful lot of ribbing.
I bet you did.
Yeah, when I was on the professional tennis tour. In fact, I remember one time playing with Marty Reeson, who was one of the world's best doubles players at the time in the early 70s, said that if I didn't have so many carrots hanging out my ears, I'd be a lot faster. And in fact, even speaking of the carrot story, one of my radio talk shows I was doing one time, a lady called up and said, you know, my husband is a construction worker. I can't send him out with a carrot in his stomach. And, you know, there's a great misconception about vegetarian food. Many people don't think that you can actually have A, the variety, and B, get filled up, and C, be quite strong. And that was also very helpful for me, too. When I switched over to being a vegetarian 1 year after doing that, I ended up with the highest fitness index of any athlete in Canada. My left-hand strength increased 38%. And that was a great booster for me because, you know, the first year everybody told me, you know, I was going to die. My father thought I'd flipped out, as most parents do, and when their children make an adjustment. And what really amazed me was the fact that most people were really very ignorant of what food did for you. You know, they just felt that if you didn't eat meat and fish and poultry, you were a goner.
Now, I put these fried potatoes in here just very quickly, stirring them around, and I've grated some fresh cheese. This is rennetless cheese. You can get it in any health food store. Rennet comes from animals. It comes from the stomach linings of animals, and actually most health food stores, well, all health food stores, certainly even supermarkets today now, carry cheese that you can get without rennet in it.
And it'll actually say rennetless cheese?
It says rennetless cheese right on the package.
Okay.
So you know that it's pure. Just sprinkle a little bit on here, turn your fire down, put the top on this, and our meal is ready. As soon as that cheese melts, we can serve out and have a delicious breakfast here. Now, Peter, let's open this up and take a look and see how this looks.
Wonderful.
See, the cheese just melts naturally, right? Just cover it up from the heat. And, you know, you can serve out a nice breakfast or a brunch to friends, and it doesn't look like something foreign, like they've never seen before. You know, people think vegetarian, oh, what are they going to eat? Here's a very attractive-looking preparation that looks very familiar.
Really does. Looks just like scrambled eggs.
You can serve this up with any number of things, but we suggest here a fresh, homemade raisin bran muffin. It just really complements nicely with your meal, adds the roughage you need, and you have a well-balanced, healthful, nutritious way to start your day.
It's great.
Now we're going to show you some dinner recipes. We have minestrone soup, spinach lasagna, we have a fresh salad, green beans. And Peter, I hope you've worked up a good appetite. You're ready for all this.
Sure have, Nancy.
Okay. What we started first here, and you can see we've already prepared, is just a fresh Italian salad. You can create anything your imagination desires with a salad. We've used romaine lettuce, fresh tomatoes, olives, avocado, carrots, and so forth, but it's just unlimited. There are so many different varieties of lettuce besides iceberg lettuce, which I think is the lowest on the scale of nutritive value when you talk about lettuce.
Right.
Very simply, we're going to make a nice minestrone soup. You just put about a tablespoon or so of olive oil in the bottom of the pan. And just pour a little olive oil in here. Simple enough. Heat that up just a little bit. And I mentioned to you a spice earlier called hing or asafoetida, which is likened to onions and garlic, easier to digest.
Right.
Just a little bit we want to put in here, maybe a quarter of a teaspoon in there. There we go. Now I get this. Just saute lightly. This is cabbage. We'll add a little bit of time to the soup. Next, we throw in some diced up tomatoes. Stir fry that a little more. Then I added a few garbanzo beans.
Okay.
Maybe a half a cup soaked garbanzo beans. Turn this heat up just a little bit more.
Did they come as they are, or did you have to pre-cook?
You can buy garbanzo beans so that they're already pre-cooked. I soaked these. You can bring them to a boil and then just let them soak for 8 hours and they're fine, and then you just put them in here with a little bit of, this is freshly cut parsley And simple enough, we just have to add approximately 5 cups of water. We'll put the lid on and just let it cook down a little bit, and then we'll add some more vegetables as we move along. But this will just get us going a little bit.
As you're preparing this, is there set order for vegetables to go in, or?
Well, there is. You want to put your beans in, as I've done here first, especially if they're not fully cooked, because they'll take longer
Right.
to cook. So you kind of want to get those on right away. And in a sequence here, we'll be adding some carrots, celery, zucchini, potatoes. And then as a little bit of a garnish with some Parmesan cheese, and you're all set.
Great.
We'll put a little barley in there as well towards the end. So, okay, now while this soup is simmering along, before we add the other ingredients, what we want to do is get our sauce on, because to make a really good tomato sauce, you want it to set and cook down a little bit, so all the spices cook in that sauce and really add some nice flavor. Now we need to add, again, just a little bit of olive oil, maybe 2 tablespoons in the bottom of the pan.
When I was growing up and had a chance to possibly play professional hockey just at one level below, we were trained on a big steak dinner. In fact, many athletes up until just recently were trained on that. And now we're seeing many of the training tables switching to the carbohydrate type dinner, so the lasagnas. In fact, Italian food is becoming very, very popular.
We're blending up, just very quickly, pureeing some Italian tomatoes with a little basil in there.
We're just starting to become very much aware and sensitive to the proper balance of foods that should go in. For example, in 1965, most of the charts said you should have 50% of your food intake should be protein. And then the charts in 1975 somehow or other switched to 30%. And today, 1985, 86 era, they're talking about 10% of your food intake. And I'm sure we're going to, in fact, the World Health Organization even says 5%. And what the athletes are now eating more and more of are carbohydrates. And what this does is it's your long-term breakdown into glycogen, which is your muscle sugar. And that's why you'll see a lot of the triathletes and the marathon runners. They will have lots of pasta before their event, lots of spaghetti and the noodles and the rice and the potatoes and things like that. So the Italian restaurants, the Italian food markets are very excited about this new trend in food because it fits in very nicely. And in fact, something like the vegetarian lasagna is becoming a very popular meal for athletes.
Let's just tell you what's going on with this sauce just a little bit. We just put the olive oil on the bottom of the pan and a little of that asafoetida, and then put some of these Italian tomatoes in here. And now we just want to add a little bit of water and spice it up with some herbs, Italian herbs, oregano, basil, a little salt and pepper. You want to add, approximately 2 cups of water here to this, and then the sauce will cook down slowly with 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and it really, all the herbs flavor comes out, and it'll make it a really wonderful taste. So I'm putting just a little bit of salt and pepper here, and put about a tablespoon of oregano. No, maybe a teaspoon of oregano for this amount of sauce. We're making just a smaller batch here. While all this is happening, we're going to just boil the noodles as well. And this will all orchestrate and come together in a very nice fashion. But we're going to boil some whole wheat noodles. There are many different noodles you can buy today to make lasagna. These are just whole wheat noodles that you can pick up at the health food store. And they're 100% whole wheat noodles. They have spinach noodles now and
artichoke noodles, yeah.
Great variety. So there's a lot of different things you can do. We're going to make a whole wheat spinach lasagna tonight. So once this water boils and we put these, let's see, it might be ready here. Yes, great. Now, again, you just want to put a little bit of oil because noodles tend to stick together. So if you just put a touch of oil in there and a little bit of salt in the water as well. Not too much. You don't really need very much at all. Maybe half a teaspoon salt in there. And when you, in cooking lasagna, you don't want it, you just want to slide the noodles in real kind of one at a time in a full boil, or else they will stick together. So I know that's a problem sometimes when people cook. Just slide them in gently. There you go, simple, full boil.
Are you trying now just to get them soft? Is that the goal of
Yeah, they're not, in Italian it's al dente. You don't want to really cook them to death,
Yeah,
just a little bit. Right, because you're going to bake them in the oven, so you don't want them to be, you know, like mush. Now we want to just check back on this soup just a little bit here. It's looking good. Then you just add your carrots and your celery. You're going to let that cook another maybe 10 minutes. And then the vegetables that cook very quickly here, potatoes, zucchini. Let's put in a
Potato
little,
cooks quickly, does it?
Yeah, when it's diced like this, you see, they
Right.
cook very quickly.
Because baked potatoes always seem to take such a long time.
They will
That's
take
interesting, because, you know, if I was working this, I would have put the potatoes in first. It was almost like the reverse order, so this is quite an
Yeah.
education.
Just, they'll cook very quickly diced like this. Now here, we have a little barley, and we'll go ahead and put this barley in now, because that takes a little bit longer. All right, this sauce is looking really nice. It's starting to thicken up a little bit. You want to put a little bit of, I've got some raw sugar, and you always want to put a little bit of sugar in a tomato. Maybe a teaspoon is all you need, just a little bit.
What does that do?
Well, tomatoes tend to be a little bit acidic.
Acidic, right.
And
Okay.
a little bit just balances off enough, so you don't want a sweet sauce, but...
You got to have quite a few hands in the kitchen, right? People don't appreciate this sometimes. All the meal just appears on the plate and...
They don't realize. See, now look, here we go. You want to maybe rinse a little bit of it with a little cool water for this, any excess starch we don't need in the diet.
Okay.
And just drain these lightly.
Okay, so here come the potatoes. Those are the
Right.
ones I would have put in first. All right.
And we'll put a little zucchini in here as well. You can put it about right in with the potatoes now. There we go. Great. Peter, we just put a touch of olive oil on the bottom of this pan just so that the noodles don't stick when we're going to bake this in the oven. And then we're just going to layer these noodles and this stuffing on. Spinach.
What are we doing here now, by the way?
Well, we're just going to spice up. This is the ricotta cheese filling that will go in the between the noodles. And we just, basically we have ricotta cheese.
Okay.
And some fresh ground Parmesan cheese and a little bit different spices. Not too much actually is needed here. Little herbs, little oregano, salt, and pepper. And you want to just kind of knead it, stir it, till you get a nice creamy consistency here. And then we are just going to layer your noodles down the bottom of your casserole here. You put a little sauce on the bottom of the pan there. We simply kind of spoon this on. This is when gets fun. You can kind of use your little fingers
It gets back to when you were playing in the playpen,
That's
right? Out in the
Play-Doh.
sand. Yeah. So we're putting on spinach now.
That's just fresh spinach.
You don't just throw it on there. I notice you're separating it
I like
in
to,
thin layers.
Right. Rather than chopping it up, this is fresh spinach that's just been lightly steamed. You wash, of course, spinach very thoroughly, and you just need to steam it in a tiny bit of water, a tablespoon. And it's just very nice when it's just layered down like this. And then we sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top of here. Here we have a little bit of fresh mozzarella cheese. And we just want to kind of layer a little bit on here.
You know, you've got the two low-fat cheeses here, ricotta cheese and mozzarella cheese.
That's right. So they're high protein, but you're watching the fat intake as well. So we're right down to the finishing touches here. We just ladle on a little bit more of this sauce on the top. There we go. Great.
It smells good, as well as looks good.
And let's sprinkle on a little bit Parmesan. Finishing touch here.
Now, is this your little extra addition, this Parmesan, or is this...
No, that's...
The Italians brought it over, did they?
That's right. It's a very subtle taste, but it really enhances the lasagna. You need to have Parmesan. Although, you know, more people now, I'm just using mozzarella cheese here, but I know many people are using varieties of different Monterey Jack and different cheddars and being, again, a little bit more creative. And so, you know, you can really try and experiment with different blends of cheeses, different types of noodles and so forth, adding different vegetables. So we're just sliding this in the oven. The oven's on 350, and really about 30 minutes, and this will be ready. The cheese will be bubbly and a little bit brown, not too much on the top, and it'll be all set. We just have a few finishing touches here to finish off our meal. You put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in a fry pan, and now you have these steamed vegetables here, steamed green beans. And when it's really smoking, put them in real quick. And we're going to stir fry them very quickly. And there's really not a lot of spicing required in this. The hot olive oil really adds a nice flavor. Just a very, very little bit of salt and a sprinkle of pepper, touch of hing, and you're all set. Tortilla. There we go. These are ready. This is ready. And our soup, as you can see, it's nice and thick and ready. All we do is just add about 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese in there. Give that a little stir. And we'll serve this piping hot. There we go. This practically in itself is a meal. You've got your garbanzo beans, fresh vegetables, and barley. Really, it is a meal within itself. There we go. You can serve that with a little bit of grated Parmesan cheese as a garnish. And the final touch, little fresh parsley, and you have a complete, healthful vegetarian meal. I want all of you to know about 3 wonderful books that Peter has authored. The first one, Vegetarian Primer. Really, it covers all the aspects of vegetarianism he's discussed tonight, and there are even a few really nice recipes in the back of the book. He actually knows a little bit more about cooking than he's let on during this show. The next book, Aerobic Workout Book for Men, is available as well. And I believe, was this your first book, Peter, Tennis for Life?
That's right. That started it all off, yeah.
That started it all off, Tennis for Life. And there's a little section on vegetarianism covered in the book as well. And Peter, I know you have to run off, but you might tell our viewers where they could get these books and where they'd be available for them.
Well, Nancy, there's still a few available in the bookstore, but the best place to order them would be through our world headquarters, Peter Burwash International, 2203 Timberlock Place, Suite 126, The Woodlands, Texas, 77380. Nancy, it's been great being here with you. I learned a lot, and it was a special opportunity to share with our viewers a very exciting future that vegetarianism does have.
Great. Have a safe flight, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
this vegetarian thing? Is it a fad for the gullible? The excuse of the weak for despising the strong? The haven of the tender-hearted? A lingering descent into an early grave? Is it simply the latest Hollywood craze? A scheme to make money? Or is it the way to health and happiness? Well, whether you call it prejudice or preference, convenience or conviction, habit or hang-up, all you have to do is drop your money in the slot, press the button, unwrap your choice, and live by the consequences.
It is written. A unique television ministry with host George Vandemann, meeting your deepest needs through the living Christ. Today, the vegetarian thing.
There's an old story about a science professor in a boys' school. He had an uncanny knowledge of animal life. You could show him the bone of an animal, and he would name the animal. You could show him the scale of a fish, and he would not only name the fish, but tell you all about its habits. Animal life was his world. One day, the boys decided to play a little trick on the professor. They took the skeleton of a bear and stuffed it. Then they sewed over it the skin of a lion. On its head, they fastened the horns of a Texas steer, and on its feet, they glued the hooves of a wild buffalo. Well, they spent a good many nights on the trick, and they did a pretty good job. Then one afternoon, when the professor was taking a nap, they tiptoed into his study and set up this monstrosity. Well, from outside the door, they let out an unearthly growl, such as had never been heard before. Well, as the story goes, the professor awoke, tumbled off his cot, and stood bolt upright. His reaction was enough to justify all the time that they'd spent on the trick. But then, through their peepholes, they saw a surprising thing. The professor rubbed his eyes, looked at the teeth, the horns, and finally at the split hooves. Then he said loud enough for the peepholers to hear, "Thank goodness, it's herbivorous, not carnivorous," and went back to finish his nap. Well, the professor knew that any animal with horns and split hooves is a vegetarian and would prefer hay or grass to a sleeping professor. Well, how do you react to a person who is a vegetarian? If you're like most people, you probably consider him harmless, even if you do think he's strangely put together, and go right back to your nap. Vegetarianism, however, is experiencing a surprisingly new prosperity, largely due to an excellent trend in health education and the health food movement that's sweeping the country. But people are giving up their steaks for a wide variety of other reasons too. Economical, humane, psychological, and spiritual. One of the most popular reasons, aside from the high cost of meat, is the conviction that the slaughter of animals for food is morally wrong. And then many see the vegetarian way of life as part of an attempt to escape from our mechanized society. Hollywood, of course, has not escaped the vegetarian bandwagon. Meat seems to be out with a great number of so-called in people. And if we were to do a little table hopping among the celebrities, we'd hear some interesting angles, some interesting reasons for their choice of diet. Candace Bergen feels that the slaughter of animals is primitive and cruel. She says, "I was becoming more and more conscious of the insanity around me. Killing animals to feed us seemed to be part of that insanity. First it seemed unappetizing, and then it became disgusting. Finally," she said, "it seemed so primitive, so cruel, really horrid." She says, "I think I became a vegetarian so I could look animals in the face again." Susan St. James has an interesting angle. She strongly believes that you can tell a vegetarian by his disposition. She claims there's a calm that comes over you, and a tremendous peace of mind when you're around vegetarians. Then you relate to animals a lot better, she said, because the animals sense that you're not going to kill them, and they give you faith. Well, do you suppose that animals do sense who their friends are? Does seem inconsistent, doesn't it, to treat animals as family pets, then finally betray them by sending them to the slaughterhouse. But this matter of the disposition, is it true that vegetarians are more comfortable to be around? I would hope so, of course, since I happen to be one. But you decide. Is it possible that to some extent a person absorbs the characteristics of the animals whose flesh he eats? Some think so. But this much we do know. We are, in a sense, what we eat. The cells of our body are constantly being replaced. And those cells have to be made up from the food that we give our bodies. We might be shocked if we knew how many top-level decisions, how many committee actions, how many twists in the course of history have been influenced by what somebody had for dinner. By the way, as for memorable vegetarians, who's better known than the outstanding critic George Bernard Shaw? He lived to be 94, and he said, and I quote him, "The enormity of eating scorched, defunct animals becomes impossible the moment it becomes a conscious act. For in such a diet, a man cannot do the finest work of which he's capable." And still in the past, there was Charles Spurgeon of London. He was the Billy Graham of the last century. He said, "I have lived on a purely vegetable diet and am a 100% better man for it, which convinces me that others can do so too." And John Wesley, the famed pioneer of the Methodist Church, did you know that he was a vegetarian? Well, evidently he was. It's reported that he said, "Thank God, since I've given up the eating of the flesh of animals, I've bidden adieu to all the ills my flesh was heir to." Well, we could go on. Evidently, this vegetarian thing is not new. Well, as I said a few moments ago, I personally am a vegetarian. But to be more exact, I'm a lacto-ovo vegetarian. That simply means that my diet is one that includes a limited amount of milk, eggs, and cheese. But I've never knowingly eaten flesh food, fish, or fowl. Now, I suppose that if I were down at the South Pole, there's nothing else to eat, I would eat a piece of meat. And probably if I were shipwrecked and spent a week or two on a raft, a fish that happened to flop onto that raft would be in as much danger from me as anyone else. But I've never been shipwrecked. Though I've traveled a great deal at home and abroad, by plane and otherwise, I've eaten many, many meals in restaurants of all kinds, I've just never met up with any emergency in which I felt it was necessary to eat flesh food. Someone is saying, "Pastor Vandemann, you really missed a lot." Yes, maybe I have. One thing I've missed is the risk of contracting a variety of diseases that are evidently transmitted to humans through the handling and use of meat. Ever heard of the science of zoonosis? That's the name of a branch of biological science which has carefully documented 150 diseases that have been transmitted to humans from animals, bacterial, viral, parasitic transmission, or by direct contact. Oh, but you say, I'm very careful about the quality of meat that I buy. Well, that may be true, but notice, nutrition studies have concluded that trichinosis from infected pork is no longer a concern for the general population of this country that it once was, to the credit of the producers in adjusting the food content of the swine, and the health departments and the cooperation of the meat packing industry. However, recent outbreaks of trichinosis from beef has alarmed these agencies when it was discovered that in 20% of the stores that sold beef, some of the beef had been contaminated by the knives and the grinders of the machines that had been cutting up pork. In this way, an outbreak of dreaded trichinosis has at times reared its ugly head again from pork-contaminated beef. For pork, you see, is the source of trichina. But what about poultry? Isn't it different? You ask, isn't it safe? Listen, an Associated Press dispatch says a government panel of scientists has recommended that chickens bearing cancer virus be allowed on the market as long as the birds don't look too repugnant. And what about fish? Surely they're clean. Someone says, after all, they take a bath every day. Well, in Canada's clean rivers, it's been discovered that only 1% of the fish contain cancer. But 4%, my friend, 4 times as much cancer has been found in the fish taken from the Fox River Basin that drains the waste and toxic poisons of the Chicago, Illinois area. Yes, I think you'll agree, I've missed a lot by being a vegetarian. Now, a person could become a vegetarian for a variety of reasons. By refusing to eat meat, you could protest the violence in our civilization. Or your vegetarianism could be an ecological protest. A vegetarian can be supported by 1/3 the land required to feed a meat eater. Imagine. Yes, you could become a vegetarian out of protest, but fortunately, there's an even better reason for making the change. It could be your way of responding to God's invitation to eat that which is good. Let me read it for you. Isaiah 55, verse 2. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance. Well, that's interesting. Foodstuffs that don't give you strength? Oh, but most people think that meat gives you strength, that in fact you have to have it for strength. Now, is this true? Listen to this from Dr. Stair of Harvard University. He said, lumberjacks may demand plenty of red meat, but that demand rests on habit, not on nutritional or a medical basis. Habit? Oh, but don't you have to have meat for endurance? Someone insists. Listen, an article in Nutrition Today reports experiments with athletes on various diets. Those on a fat and meat protein diet rode those bicycles only 57 minutes, and they were worn out. Those on a normal mixed diet rode bicycles for 1 hour and 54 minutes before becoming exhausted. But those on a high carbohydrate diet with no meat rode 2 hours and 47 minutes, just about 3 times longer than the high meat and fat diet. I was born in the shadow of Pikes Peak in Colorado. It's always been a mystery to me how anyone could run up and down that 14,000-foot peak. But they have a race every year. It's a 28-mile round trip, up and down. And a friend of mine, Mavis Lindgren, among others, of course, has run that mountain on one way 2 times, and she ran both ways once in 9 hours and 11 minutes. And would you believe it? She's 78 years of age. Before the age of 62, she had suffered several severe bouts with pneumonia. And in sheer self-defense, she changed her health habits and began exercising, walking, and running. And now at 78, she puts us all to shame. She runs 60 miles a week. She's a vegetarian, neither smokes nor drinks. Talk about drive and endurance. If flesh food is necessary for endurance, then how do we explain the people of Hunza, that interesting Shangri-La north of Pakistan, where some men and women live to be well over 100 years of age? The Hunza Cuts for centuries have eaten very little meat of any kind. In recent years, with better access to our Western world, they eat more. Now, their endurance for centuries has been legend. But today, with more of our Western food, there have been some disappointing changes in their longevity. It should be no surprise, then, that the traditional diet of the Hunza people through the centuries almost exactly parallels the original diet that God gave to man in Eden when man was first created. Yes, right back at the beginning, God started out man with a new body, and he told him what to put in it. Listen to Genesis 1, verse 29. See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. A new body, and how to feed it, what to put into it to keep it at operating peak efficiency. A sort of owner's manual, you see. And what did God give? He gave fruits, grains, and nuts, and then later added vegetables. Yes, in the beginning, everybody went for natural foods, and those foods kept a person going a long time. Adam lived 950 years. Methuselah lived 969. Many of those people lived 300, 400, 600, and 700 years. Then came the flood of Noah's day. And after the flood, because the natural foods had all been destroyed, God gave man permission, I believe as an emergency measure, to eat the flesh of animals. Not all animals, you understand. Only certain ones that God designated as fit for food. But we like the emergency diet, evidently, and mankind is still eating and liking it. However, it's interesting to note that when man started fooling around with flesh food, things started going downhill immediately, including his lifespan. Now, we know that Jesus ate fish while here on earth, and possibly the flesh foods eaten by the humble peasants of Galilee. But with the rising incidence of disease in food animals and the myriad of shots given to counteract disease in these animals, the New Testament counsel to care for our bodies as temples of the Holy Spirit make good sense. You see, God has told me that my body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? And he has told us not to defile that body. Chapter 3, verse 17, if anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. He's told me to eat and drink to the glory of God. Verse 13 of the 10th chapter, therefore, whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. I am a Seventh-day Adventist minister, and the longevity of my people, even with only about half of them active vegetarians, yields amazing statistics. Since 1900, the longevity of the general population in the United States rose 5.6 years. In other words, at age 40, the general population lives 5.6 years longer now than in 1900. But during this same time, the longevity, the lifespan specifically of the 40-year-old Adventist male rose 11 plus years, or 6 years longer than the public in general. In addition, Seventh-day Adventists experience only one-half the cancer, one-half the heart trouble suffered by the rest of us. That's pretty convincing evidence that their lifestyle, as documented by the New Testament counsel, is worth considering, wouldn't you say? What about the nation's #1 killer, heart disease? Well, the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Coronary Heart Disease Prevention has said as recently as 1983 that in their opinion, the relationship between diet, blood cholesterol, and heart attacks is a causal relationship. Did you notice that word, causal? Seldom has a scientific organization of such prestige said that diet and blood cholesterol can be the cause of heart trouble. Evidently, there's a growing awareness in the best of scientific circles that a meat and egg-laden fatty diet is not only suspect, but is to a large extent the culprit in robbing us of vital heart support. Well, some of you may decide to go out to the kitchen after the telecast and clean out your refrigerator. And for that reaction, you're to be commended. But I say be careful. Be sure that as you make the transition, if you should decide to do so, in your diet, do it slowly and intelligently. Be sure that as you leave off flesh proteins, Little by little, you replace them with other adequate vegetable proteins. This is so important. Oh, I wish I could invite you all home to dinner. One at a time, you understand, not all at once. I'd like you to enjoy with me a big baked russet potato. I used to say Idaho potato until my friends in Maine got after me. So a big baked russet potato, perhaps with sour cream and chives. Then one of those delicious protein entrees made from grains or soybeans or nuts. Not heavy, just light and delicious. Nellie, my wife, is absolutely unsurpassed at making them. Then a lightly cooked vegetable or two, an attractive green salad, some good whole wheat bread, and a simple, light dessert. I tell you, this is the life. You see, the vegetarian diet is certainly wholesome and nutritious, but it can be delectable as well. And you feel so much better living this way. In fact, no subject we present on this telecast is more appreciated, brings more response than this one. And that's the way it should be. Salvation. That is, success in lowering the risk of heart disease. Salvation is largely dependent upon your personal decision. You see, success in lowering the risk of heart disease, according to these experts, is largely dependent upon your personal decision. A personal decision, a commitment, and I would like to add to that statement, a commitment of dedication. And that's what it can be for you just now. If you've already made a commitment to the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior, wouldn't you like today to make a new kind of commitment? You've given Him your heart. Wouldn't you like to give Him your body too? Wouldn't you like to tell your Lord that beginning now, you want your commitment to Him to be complete, mind and body, without any reservation? And you can do it just now as we pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for this new understanding of the relationship between our bodies and our Creator. It's challenging. It's so practical. Please help us to cooperate with our Maker. Help us to live sensibly and to discover the satisfactions of God's natural way to radiant health. In your wonderful saving name we ask it. Amen.
I want to join Pastor Vandemann in telling you about our special offer today. Remember, it's an appreciation for any gift you can send for the support of this telecast. Your gift will help It Is Written continue in an even stronger ministry than before. When you write, simply ask for the book 375 Meatless Recipes and enclose your gift. Or just ask for the Vegetarian Cookbook and we'll know what you mean. If you want to handle the matter by phone on our 800 number, you may give your Visa or MasterCharge credit card number for the tax-deductible gift you intend to make. And now here's the information you need.
As a convenience, you may request today's very special offer, 375 meatless recipes, by phoning our toll-free number now, 1-800-253-3000, and telling the operator the amount of your gift, and then charge it to your MasterCard or Visa. Canadian viewers, please write to our Canadian address. Our U.S. toll-free number is 1-800-253-3000. Call now. Lines are open 24 hours daily. That's 1-800-253-3000. You may use your MasterCard or Visa for your tax-deductible gift. And the cookbook of 375 meatless recipes will be sent postpaid. Call now. In the U.S., 1-800-253-3000. Or, if you prefer, you may write to George Vandemann, Thousand Oaks, California, 91360, and enclose your gift. The cookbook will be sent postpaid. Write George Vandemann, Thousand Oaks, California, 91360, or call our 800 number now.
And before I say goodbye, may I say again that I want you to have this cookbook, 375 meatless recipes, for your very own. And now, goodbye, everyone. But remember, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God.
Hello, Roland Linhoff again. The who is right arguments. Do you have them in your marriage? Do you know what causes them? It's probably different than what you thought. Don't miss Pastor Vandemann's message, Fighting to Be Right, next week at this same time on It Is Written.